Robert John Maudsley was born on the 26th of June 1953 in Speke, Liverpool. He was one of 12 children born to his parents, George Maudsley, who was a coalman, and Jean, his mother. With a family of that size, his parents couldn't cope, and Maudsley was put into the care of the Catholic Church orphanage called Nazareth House, which was run by nuns. He stayed there until he reached the age of 8, when his parents came back for him and took him home to live as a family unit. But this wasn't the happy ending to a troubled childhood. His parents subjected him to years of abuse. The boys were the only ones who were beaten by their father, but their mother didn't help and was said to even instigate the abuse. The boys were hit with belts and sticks and their father's fists. Maudsley was the youngest of those who lived with them, and the siblings felt that this affected him more because of his age. After a year, Maudsley was moved on and put with foster carers, him and him alone. None of the other children were moved away from their parents. At the age of 16, Maudsley ran away from his foster parents' house and made his way to London. He was a big part of the drug scene and often had to find different ways to make money to fund his ever-growing habit. He took to selling his body. This was a quick and easy way to make cash. After a crazed evening on drugs, Maudsley was hospitalised after an attempt at his own life, stating that he heard voices telling him to kill his parents. In 1974, Maudsley was back on the streets, selling himself for drugs again, when he was picked up by a man named John Farrell. They were in a car in Wood Green when John showed Maudsley pictures that angered him. They were of young boys that Farrell had abused. Maudsley took it upon himself to right Farrell's wrongs and strangled him with a wire. Maudsley, knowing that he had done wrong, took himself to the authorities, asking them for help for his anger and his murdering intent, telling them that he knew he would do something like this. He was put into psychiatric care, and a trial for murder concluded that he was not fit to stand in court for this murder, so was sent to Broadmoor, the maximum security hospital. He was just 21 at this time. Maudsley was serving his time when he and another resident called David Cheeseman decided to teach a convicted child molester a lesson. He was called David Francis. The two men found a way to lock themselves in a room. The pair tortured Francis over a long 9-hour period until he eventually died. This was in 1977. And after this event, Maudsley was moved after the conviction of manslaughter was put against him. He was taken to Wakefield Prison, a place which had accrued the nickname Monster Mansion. And he was very unhappy with this move and wanted to return to Broadmoor. This was refused, and a whole life order was handed to Maudsley, which meant that he would never be released back into society. In 1978, still unhappy with his living situation, Maudsley invited Sowney Darwood to his cell. When he got in there, Maudsley launched at him with a knife that he had made in his cell. He killed Darwood with a mix of stabbing and strangulation. Then after this, he calmly hid the body under his bed in his cell, then went out looking for other victims. His anger took over him, and he was said to be picturing his parents at the time of each of these murders. He had openly told the courts that if he had killed his parents in 1970, then none of the other killings would have taken place and that he would be a free man. Still on his rampage, he asked many inmates to accompany him to his cell. All refused, as they could see the madness in his eyes. An actual quote from one inmate on that fateful day. Instead, Maudsley made his way into 56-year-old Bill Roberts' cell. Roberts had been convicted of assaulting a child, and while he was laying on his bed, Maudsley attacked and killed him. He was said to be cutting open his skull and smacking his head against the wall of his small blood-stained cell. After this brutal attack was finished, Maudsley was calm and collected and made his way to the guards and placed the knife down in front of them and stated that they would be too short when it came to the next roll call. After the bodies were found and forensics had their chance to look at them, it was rumoured that a part of Robert's brain had been missing, and with the Chinese whisper culture, it was spread that Maudsley had in fact eaten part of the brain of his inmate, Bill Roberts. However, this has not been substantiated by anyone who had performed the autopsy. When these rumours ran, Maudsley was given the nickname Hannibal the Cannibal. He had only been in Wakefield prison for a few weeks before this killing spree. Another 2 murder charges were to be given to Maudsley, and on top of this, the courts had decided that this man should not be in general population in prison. He was considered too dangerous to mix with other inmates, and so he was put into solitary confinement, where he would remain. In March 2000, Maudsley wrote a letter after being deemed totally untreatable. He asked to be allowed to be let out of solitary confinement or be allowed to commit suicide. He wrote to newspapers and media outlets. His writing was eloquent and intelligent. Maudsley was considered to have a higher than average IQ, and his love for poetry and art stemmed an interest in studying for a degree while he was in prison. The letter to the Times was published, and in it the killer asked for access to music, specifically classical, and a TV and a budgie. The letter read, "If the prison service says no, then I ask for a simple cyanide capsule, which I shall willingly take, and the problem of Robert John Maudsley can easily and swiftly be resolved." At this time, a cell which had been specifically made for Maudsley, measuring 18 foot by 15 foot. It is bulletproof and was placed underground, away from anyone, and many checkpoints have to be completed if you were to get near the glass house called the Cage. It has little furnishings. A bed is a concrete slate, and a table and chairs which are made from compressed cardboard. The entrance to this cage is a solid steel door. He is allowed to exercise and is taken to a yard by no less than 4 guards to a small 20-foot garden where he can walk just once a day for 1 hour. Maudsley has not come into contact with any other inmates for over 25 years. The pleas Maudsley made were heard by a panel, but they were swiftly denied, and he will remain in the cage and in solitary confinement, and this will not be relaxed for the safety of other inmates. Maudsley considers himself a vigilante, and the people he murdered were bad people and should not have been in society anyway. Either way, it is murder, and the penalties are prison. Robert John Maudsley is one of only 26 people who have been given a whole life order, which means they will never be let out of prison. He has had many assessments over the years, and it has been said that he is 100% psychopath. He is deemed the UK's most dangerous prisoner, and it has been said that he cannot be rehabilitated. Maudsley's parents died a few years before his appeal. He is now 68 years old and enjoys little perks in prison. He spent his 68th birthday playing video games and watching wildlife programs. He is popular with people on the outside, and he receives lots of letters from the general public and also from his brothers, who regularly keep in touch. Maudsley has been in prison for over 4 decades and is the longest serving prisoner in the UK in solitary confinement, and he will remain there until he dies.